Thunder in your bones. Welcome to the moment where silence becomes your symphony and restraint becomes your blade. You stand here, not to curse the darkness, but to summon the shadows to do your work. You did not clap back. You did not lash out in fury. You did not shout revenge. You buried them under their own words. Listen close for the whispers of doubt you planted deeply. You did not need to raise your voice because their truth was a fragile cage, and you slipped inside it. Their own promises echo back at them now, hollow as empty rooms. You didn't shout lies. You let theirs become obvious. You didn't become what they expected. You became the judge of their own statements. You remember that moment when they boasted, when they promised sky, when they claimed stars, and you watched. You nodded when they stated impossible feats. You allowed every boast to settle. You allowed every label they claimed to solidify because you understood that time reveals all masks. You listened, you watched, you held in your heart all their declarations, and now their words weigh heavy on them. Their own voice becomes a burden, their credibility in question because you stood still. You made no dramatic gesture. You made no headline. You simply didn't engage. You simply stood as witness, and witness is a power too seldom claimed. They tried to wound with words. They tried to craft narratives to break you. They planted seeds of fear when they whispered behind your back, when they spread rumor, when they sculpted versions of you that served their comfort. Yet you did not respond with rage. You responded with silence that was louder than their shouting. You remembered every promise. They swore loyalty. They promised support. They swore you would bend or you would break. They proclaimed your weakness before you showed strength. They preemptively judged you to their audience, to your face, to your back. They wanted you cornered, but you walked. You didn't clap back. You sowed truth. You let the witnesses of each moment stand and speak. Their own words became chains. Their own lies became cages. Their own image crumbled from within because you carried integrity inside you. Integrity that does not need to shout to be heard. You made them question their own credibility. You made them revisit every statement. They publicized claims that now float as echoes in empty chambers. Their promises dissolve because they were built on shifting sand. Their accusations wilt because they were watered by envy, not a substance. In the darkness you found light, not by creating noise, but by holding your ground. They expected a confrontation, a spectacle, a collapse. They thirsted for your reaction. A collapse would give them satisfaction, but you offered only calm. You offered only silence, sharpened by your self-respect. Let them tremble at the echo of their own declarations. For every boast they made that did not align with action, for every confidence they paraded that was not earned, for every finger they pointed that hid their own guilt, you let their words mirror back at them. You watched as their convictions frayed as shadows cast by past actions. You saw the contradiction between what they said and what they did. The mask between intention and outcome grew thin, and you let it tear, because truth demands no microphone. You did not clap back. You buried them under the mass of their own statements. Their words are their own burden. Their reputation now a question mark in every room. Their credibility uncertain, because you did not amplify their narrative. You did not help carry their weight. With silence, you expose the fracture. They speak still, but their voice falters. Because you are silent, you breathe in the space between their words. Their echo in your life now becomes a haunting. Because you did not need to respond. You just stood. You were the immovable. You sheltered your peace. You guarded your dignity. You did not let their provocations become your downfall. You did not chase their version of victory. You redefined victory. You made them the architects of their own downfall because their words were weak. You made each statement count because truth undercuts falsehood, and now they question themselves. Because how could one hear echoes of promises broken? How could one see integrity bleed through every contradiction? How could one find themselves beset by their own deception? And you are not to blame for their unraveling. You simply existed. You simply held what is real inside you. For those watching this moment for themselves, hear this. You don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need to lash out to be strong. You don't need to write them off. You need only to stay true to self. Let time be your ally. Let silence accompany your strength. Let truth carve the pathway ahead. Because when others plant seeds of deceit, when they parade lies like trophies, when they wrap illusion in sound, you hold the mirror. They will see what they claimed, what they promised, what they failed to deliver, and that sight shakes foundations. Your power lies not in retaliation. Your power lies in restraint. Your power lies in integrity. Your power lies in the unbreakable bond between you and your own truth. That you preserve dignity over drama. That you refuse to respond to chaos. That you let their contradictions speak louder than you ever could. You did not clap back. You buried them under their own words. And from that burial arises your triumph. They are haunted by the sound of their own voice. They are caught in the web of their own claims. They are undone by that which they once believed would raise them. Let this be a message to every soul who doubts you, every voice who undermined you, every promise broken by lips, but not by action. You are not obligated to respond. You are not required to defend yourself. Above all, remain true. Let time peer behind their veil. Let silence pull back the curtain. Let their own words become the verdict. You made them question their own credibility. You will leave behind no spectacle but a quiet storm, a reckoning born of patience, an uprising forged in dignity. They will measure their truth against their own voice, and every cracked promise will echo. Walk forward knowing this. History remembers restraint when it is wrapped in truth. It records calm when the chaos fades. It honors the one who holds fast when all else trembles. And your legacy will be that you did not fight with their weapons. You fought with something far heavier, their own words. So rise now in the dark with your head high, in the silence with your spirit intact, in the aftermath when all eyes seek confession, in the stillness when all that remains are their statements. May those statements break them. May those words betray them. May their credibility unravel, and may you stand untouched, unshaken, victorious. You did not clap back. You buried them under their own words. You made them question their own credibility, and the world will watch as every word they uttered betrays their claim. And in that witnessing, you discover your own power, because truth lives in you, and silence bears witness, and your strength is not measured in sound, but in the weight of all you did not say, and all you held inside, and all you were. When all they have left are their own words, may you rise beyond question. May you become the question, and may they never forget that silence sometimes roars, and restraint sometimes shatters illusions, and so the silence stretched, not as absence, but as presence, full, commanding, undeniable. You didn't speak because you didn't have to. You didn't explain. You didn't chase understanding, and you didn't beg to be seen. Because you knew something far more dangerous than outrage. You knew who you were, and in a world addicted to reaction, that was your rebellion. That was your defiance. That was your fire without flame. They expected a war of noise. They expected you to fight on their battlefield by their rules in their chaos. They threw words like stones, hoping you'd break under pressure, hoping you'd return the fire and scorch everything, including your own image. But instead, you built walls of reason. You stood inside your quiet and watched as they dismantled themselves. It was never about what they said. It was about what they couldn't take back. You gave them the space to collapse into their own echoes. There is something chilling about silence that isn't surrender. Silence that is calculated, deliberate, chosen. It unsettles people who rely on your reaction to define their power. Because when you do not react, you force them to react to themselves. They stumble over their own logic. They rewatch every word. They revise their memories in private, and in doing so, they question everything they tried to impose upon you. That is not revenge. That is revelation, and revelation is final. You walk through their accusations like a storm walks through a city, untouched by the noise, leaving behind a kind of hush that forces even the doubters to listen. You didn't argue because truth doesn't argue. It doesn't chase. It doesn't bend itself to fit perception. You buried them with something heavier than hate. You buried them with exposure, with the full light of who they pretended to be and who they proved themselves not to be. Now let's speak clearly, for those who still think strength must be loud. You didn't need to win the argument. You didn't need to craft the cleverest response. Because you were never playing to the crowd. You were holding court with something bigger than applause. You stood in alignment with time, and time will always side with the consistent, the principled, the ones who kept their hands clean when it would have been easy to throw mud. They didn't fear your words. They feared your ability to reflect theirs. You became the mirror. Every sentence they once threw with confidence now ricochets. Their voice becomes a trap, their declarations a maze, and they walk it alone, trying to find an exit from a reality they wrote themselves into. You gave them the rope. They wove it into something they thought was a crown. Only later did they realize it was a noose made of words. Theirs, not yours. That is the power of quiet vengeance. Not vengeance born of harm, but of exposure. Not payback, but patience. Not plotting, but positioning yourself so that nothing you do is dishonest and everything they do is visible. And when visibility meets contradiction, collapse follows. You didn't need to destroy them. You simply let them be fully seen. People forget this. Character has a voice, and it speaks long after the noise has died down. It shows up when the crowd has left and the cameras are off. It shows up when the narratives fade and only history remains. You played the long game, not because you couldn't respond, but because you chose what was eternal over what was immediate. You chose what was real over what was loud. You stood in that storm and didn't flinch. You held the line. You buried them, not in cruelty, not in hate, but in truth. Their words, their contradictions. That is the kind of strength no one can train for, because it comes from knowing yourself in a way that does not need validation to stand. It comes from understanding that silence can hold more weight than rage. That dignity can cut deeper than mockery. That restraint is not weakness. It is control. And they are not just shaken, they are changed. Because now they must wrestle not with your reply, but with their own legacy. They must ask themselves, did I really say that? Did I really stand for that? Was I honest when I spoke, or was I posturing? And those questions will echo far longer than your voice ever could. Because when someone realizes they've exposed their own flaws, there is no peace in that. there is only reckoning. Let this be a lesson to anyone who thinks silence is surrender. It is not. It is strategy. It is armor. It is a statement written in stillness. You don't need to raise your voice when your values are already raised. You don't need to defend when your life speaks for itself. And you certainly don't need to match their chaos, because you're not here to match them. You're here to transcend them. You buried them under the weight of their own words, and now they carry that burden. Let them. Don't take it back. Don't feel guilty for doing nothing, because nothing is not empty. Nothing was your choice. Your silence was deliberate. Your restraint was power. You let them create the very pit they now stand in, not because you wanted their downfall, but because you refused to participate in your own destruction just to prove a point. This is what self-mastery looks like. It is not always glorious. It is not always visible. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is lonely, but it is always worth it. Because when the dust settles and they look back, they will not remember the fight. They will remember the reflection of themselves. And they will remember that you didn't lift a hand or a word or a shout. You simply let them speak, and they buried themselves. To those watching who are tired of being misunderstood, tired of being painted in false light, tired of the games, hear this. You do not need to chase vindication. You do not need to scream your truth to be heard. You simply need to endure with clarity. Stand where you are. Hold your truth like a sword no one can see, and let time prove what your words never had to. There will always be those who misunderstand your silence, who take your calm for weakness, who believe that if you're not clapping back, you must be hiding. Let them believe. That is not your burden to carry. Let them write the false story. Just make sure you are writing the true one, quietly, clearly, daily. Because when the stories meet, when the truth and the lie stand face to face, only one survives. And you didn't survive by shouting. You thrived by choosing not to. You preserved your energy. You focused on what mattered. And because of that, you are not just remembered. You are studied. You are respected. You are questioned. Not for what you said, but for how you didn't need to say it. In the end, silence is not about winning the argument. It's about ending it. It's about taking away the power of the lie by refusing to energize it. And when you do that, when you hold to your truth while they crumble under theirs, that is not just strength. That is leadership. You didn't clap back. You buried them under their own words. And now, they sit with what they said, and what you didn't have to. You stood tall, steady, unshaken. And it wasn't because you lacked emotion. It wasn't because you didn't feel the fire rising in your chest. It was because you mastered it. You carried your pain without spectacle, and your strength without performance. You knew that noise does not equal power, and silence does not equal surrender. You knew that real power doesn't shout. It hums beneath the surface, waiting for the moment to reveal itself through undeniable outcomes, not impulsive reactions. And now, look what you've done. Look how they fumble now, how they pause before they speak, how they second-guess their next sentence, how their confidence doesn't come so easy anymore. You made them question their own credibility. You made them reevaluate the foundation of their words, because what they built was brittle, and you brought no hammer, no fire, no fists. You just let it fall under its own weight. That's the kind of power they don't teach in books. That's the kind of dominance they don't broadcast in loud speeches or on bright stages. Because it's not designed for the spotlight. It's designed for legacy, for truth, for self. And it requires something rare restraint, discipline, self-respect, and not everyone has that. That's why not everyone can do what you did. You didn't just survive the conflict, you transformed it. You made it into a mirror. You gave it back to them, untouched, and said without saying, "Here, look at what you've said. Look at what you've done. I'm not here to convince the world. I'm here to be the evidence." And evidence you became. Evidence that real strength doesn't need to perform, that real composure doesn't need applause, that real resilience doesn't need to retaliate, because it's grounded, it's unshakable, it's built from something deeper than pride or ego. Now they live in the shadow of what they said, not because you punished them, but because you didn't. That's the twist. That's what hits the deepest. You didn't retaliate. You didn't fire back. You didn't try to match them. You let them go on record. You let them build their story, brick by brick, line by line. And when the dust settled, they found themselves trapped in a version of events they could no longer justify. That's not vengeance. That's clarity. That's not defeat. That's dismantling. And you didn't lift a finger. You didn't clap back. You buried them, not in cruelty, but in accountability. You let them talk. You let them pose. You let them stretch their illusion so far that it tore under its own pressure. You didn't interrupt. You didn't try to clear your name in a crowd that wouldn't listen. You just waited. And now the crowd is silent. Because truth, when revealed slowly, hits harder than anything shouted in heat. There is a terrifying elegance in that kind of justice, in the way it arrives without force, in the way it moves without warning. It's the kind of justice that walks in long after the argument is over and makes everyone reevaluate who really won. And you won. Not just the moment, but the memory. Not just the dispute, but the story that remains afterward. Because they can deny your voice, but they cannot deny the outcome. They can question your silence, but they cannot deny the collapse of their own credibility. And they can try to rewrite the story, but too many saw the truth unfold. Too many, remember, who stood still while the chaos unfolded around them. That memory is yours now. That legacy is etched. And this is for the ones watching you now, for the quiet ones, the underestimated ones, the misunderstood ones, the ones who've been told that silence is weakness, that calm means you don't care, that not fighting back is the same as losing. Number. You were just waiting, holding, watching, preparing, because you understood something others don't, that time is your greatest witness. That silence is not surrender, it's strategy. Let the world keep spinning. Let the noise keep rising. You don't have to match it. You don't have to lose yourself to prove yourself. Because now they know. You didn't clap back. You buried them under their own words. And in doing so, you made them question not just their attack, but their identity, their principles, their entire position. You shattered the illusion they had about their own power. You introduced a truth so undeniable that they now carry it like weight, not like victory. And maybe they'll never admit it out loud. Maybe pride won't let them speak it, but it shows in their eyes, in their hesitation, in the way they try to explain themselves, not to you, but to others, to themselves, because you're no longer their opponent, you're their reminder, a reminder that character outlasts performance. The truth has a gravity no lie can escape, that silence is not the absence of fight, but the highest form of resistance, that sometimes the best way to end the game is to let your opponent play themselves. You didn't clap back, you didn't curse, you didn't stoop, you watched, you waited, You remained unbothered, unshaken, unbent. And now they are unraveling, and you're still rising. Not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't need to say.